name is Jacob Halecki. The more I know, the more I realize I know nothing. Socrates. Einstein once said, the religion of the future will be a cosmic religion. It should transcend a personal God and avoid dogmas and theology, covering both natural and the spiritual, and it should be based on a religious sense arising from the experience of all things, natural and spiritual, as a meaningful unity. He goes on to say, I want to know his thoughts, and the rest are details. His thoughts being God's thoughts, and God being an analogy for the laws of the universe, and his thoughts being physics. Seeking to know God's thoughts, either literally or metaphorically, has led me to physics, the fallacy of natural law of the gaps. In our understanding of natural law, we tend to fill it with God. My personal experience with physics and chemistry has brought me into an ever more complex system of theories which seem to interconnect. I noticed the universe seemed to start simply and becomes more complex throughout time. Is the universe supernaturally created as tested by culture, or has it begun naturally within infinite causal loops within a multiverse theory? I researched causality in different eras of time within quantum physics, different theories of space and time, as the universe became super complex in a hierarchy of extra dimensions within high particle physics and unified field theories. I became interested in multidisciplinary research, and I began to draw parallels between science, religion, and philosophy. Now, there are mathematics, geometry, and science hidden within the ancient theology and philosophy of the past. Every culture has led to some sort of emanation philosophy, relating to multiple realms or worlds emanating from a single source. Ontologically, epistemologically, and philosophically, we came to two different dualisms in logic and how we gain knowledge. Ontologically is secular with empiricism, which is gaining knowledge from our senses and our experience, while there's also rationalism, irrationalism, idealism, monism, pluralism, and materialism. Now, all these philosophies have inspired me and in my research to make parallels between science and philosophy. As Alan Watts once said in the book of the Tao, The Watercourse Way, as the universe produces our consciousness evokes the universe, and this realization transcends and closes the debate between materialists and idealists, or mentalists, determinists, and free willers, who represent the yin and yang of philosophical opinion. Dualism is the dual principles with half-truths, like lack and excess, or negative and positive. Monism, seen by Aristotle, empiricism, is the golden rule, or the ratio of the middle between two extremes being a virtue. Now, monism comes from Neoplatonism, with it relating to a supreme one. Pluralism, there are many emanations of knowledge. Materialism is focused on the material manifestations and connected with empiricism as you can sense materials. The Platonic worlds, or stages to knowledge, is being thought, imagined, belief, and perfect beauty. And perfect intelligence. Platonius is Neoplatonism. There's also three central hypotheses of a supreme transcendent one relating to perfect good and beauty, intellect, and soul. Now, the three hypotheses represent the triangle in this picture, and the four worlds represents the square, and the transcendent one is the circle in this philosophy. This symbol is known to be quintessence, and it has influence in science and logical mathematical thinking. Quintessence today is now a name for the cosmological constant alpha, capital Alpha, in the lambda CDM inflation model of physics. The universe tends to start simply, and it becomes more complex throughout time. Michio Kaku is a famous theoretical theorist of string theory, whose equation shortens the entirety of quantum field theory as multiple equations into one shortened equation, which has since been worked upon to reach a superstring theory and Cantorian set mathematic theory, which has Hausdorff dimension data sets, which are finite, but is theoretically able to infinitely nest within each other as subdimensional or fractal. String theory has 9 dimensions of space with 1 dimension of time, and it is diverged from 26 heterotic string dimensions in a closed-loop string, which was replaced by 10 dimensions of string theory. However, this hierarchical dimensional Cantor set can go all the way to 42 dimensions, which nests into each other's until it reaches 248 Hausdorff dimensions as the E8 Lie algebra, or the shape of everything. This is being the shape of everything. Access the theoryofeverything.org. The superstring hierarchy can be shown here by scaling the inverse fine structure constant divided by 2 using phi raised to the principal quantum number for when the principal quantum number equals 1 to when it equals 6. When n equals 1 to 6, when n equals 1, the dimension or inverse coupling is 42 dimensions, and its interpretation is 1 divided by the fine structure constant, grand unification inverse coupling being A of G. So that's 1 divided by the grand unification inverse coupling. Now forces have coupling to their forces, which couples the force or the field with the particle. Now that's what this describes here. Supersymmetric grand unification, or the fractal Riemann-like curvature, n equals 2. Same goes for 3, 4. When n equals 4, that's the 10 dimensions of superstrings. When n equals 5, that's 6 dimensions, or it's compactified 6 dimensions of the Cali-B-Yau manifold of superstrings. And then when n equals 6, that's the 4th dimension, which is the space-time dimension, which is described with covariation in calculus. Here's another figure showing the fractal dimensions of Hausdorff dimensions from E equals infinity point of view. Notice that the classification and comparison with orderly classical Cantor set, there's a Sierpinski gasket right here, and it has a Menger of 2 dimension. Its Hausdorff dimension is 1.5 when natural log of 3 divided by natural log of 2. Corresponding random to Hausdorff dimension for the Sierpinski gasket is 1 over phi, which is the inverse of the Hausdorff dimension of the classical Cantor set being a square. Now the Menger sponge, and it has a 4th dimensional analog of the Menger sponge, is shown here. That's 2 plus phi and 4 plus phi cubed, being a 3rd and 4th Menger or so on dimension. So the Menger sponge and the 4-dimensional analog of the Menger sponge is almost complete. We just need the exact chaotic fractal shape of the fractal hypercube. And that is a quote from in Naschie's paper in 2008. Here's another figure from Naschie's paper of fractal dimensions of Cantorian space-time. Figure 8 here, there's fractal dimensions of a hypercube starting from a 3-dimensional cube. And it goes down to the 4th dimension, 5th, 6th, 7th dimension, and so on. And here is the mathematics behind it. The process of the cube nesting leads at infinity to the average of expectation value of the Hausdorff dimension of fractal Cantorian spacetime 4 plus phi cubed, when phi equals the square root of 5 minus 1 divided by 2. Thus, although we have infinitely many dimensions, we have finite Hausdorff expectation dimensions for the nested structure. That's what Naschie said here. Now, the universe began 13.77 billion years ago, and it is singular in nature. The word universe literally translates into uni, meaning one, and verse, meaning a phrase, sentence, or word. This culturally comes from the creation story in the Judeo-Christian conception of the universe. In this conception of the universe, it was spoken into existence. In science, the names for concepts from old languages and cultures like ancient Greek. Now, alchemy has a philosophy and esotericism to it that has chemical properties, but also spiritual properties, which predates chemistry, as a chemistry came after alchemy, being a pseudoscience of which. But this term quintessence, was adopted later and becomes shown symbolically here, being relating to Neoplatonism. Quintessence is a scalar field of the magnitude or speed of which the universe is expanding. This being right here, the Big Bang and its inflation, and how dark energy is accelerating its expansion. In the physical cosmology lambda CDM model, the inflaton particle is the theoretical boson particle for a unified field which existed shortly after the Big Bang, being enough high energy physics to unify the forces into a coupling constant of one force. This one force, this one field would have a one boson particle, which then has a coupling and it has a speed to it, which can be then described as the speed magnitude of quintessence, being a scalar field. Now, the acceleration or accelerated expansion of the universe can be found using calculus by finding the first derivative of the scalar magnitude of the cosmological constant, being uppercase alpha or quintessence. The other idea in philosophy and science is there are infinite causal loops in which have infinite chains of big bangs and quantum fluctuations resulting in cosmic inflation, Boltzmann brains, and all real particle propagation through the quantum foam. These infinite causal loops being associated because of dark energy. Turbulence of gravity, which acts as, so the quantum fluctuations resulting in the cosmic inflation and all real particle propagation through the quantum foam. Now, the turbulence of gravity, which acts as miniature wormholes with miniature black and white holes. Now, according to Haramein's quantum gravity and holographic fractal universe theory, nature is made up of varying scales of Schwarzschild black holes, as seen in this figure. The black holes can go as small as the Planck mass, the Planck length, extremely small, so as large as the universe itself. And a little smaller would be than the local supercluster, the large galaxy clusters, etc., 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 as it goes down and down, being different, all different types of cosmological phenomena, being the universe, galaxies, Schwarzschild protons, local superclusters, large galaxy clusters, whirlpool galaxies, quasars, etc. Energy cannot be destroyed or created, and instead goes through an extreme cycle of black and white holes. We haven't directly observed, according to Haramein's quantum gravity and holographic fractal universe theory, nature is made up of these varying scales of Schwarzschild black holes. But we haven't directly observed these black holes. And we haven't directly observed the black holes in the Big Bang, as no one was around to see these. However, observations at CERN, which simulates quantum fluctuations in small bangs, have occurred in their laboratory. And there's also evidence from observing the cosmic background radiation left over from the Big Bang, led to valid conclusions of the validity for the Big Bang theory. There's also radiation known as Hawking radiation that we have discovered coming off black holes, as that was a theory that for the longest time, for hundreds of years, has not been proven until recently, when we used a gravitational observatory, the LIGO instrument, actually detected gravitational waves of two black holes colliding with one another. Now, two black holes colliding with one another can happen in those varying scales, the smallest black hole being the Planck length, the biggest being a universe. Now, the idea is there could be multiple bubble universes that could have impacted and bursted into each other, and creating a bruise or a super void, which could be proving that a multiverse could exist. Uppercase alpha, also known as the cosmological constant in quintessence, is the simplest solution within the lambda CDM model. Mathematically, it's dealing with the Big Bang, cosmic inflation, and quantum fluctuations, as alpha and omega lambda researchers tend to work within a flat universe in de Sitter space, as well as opposite flat universe in anti-de Sitter space, being shown here. Anti-de Sitter space in relation to string theory and superstring theory is that there is 5 dimensions associated with anti-de Sitter space being an open loop or closed loop theory in which time is in a loop, circular loop, where the past, present, and future is all in one. 5D Klein-Gordon equation shows the wave-like solutions of this form in the following equation. And there is a figure here of a hyperboloid embedded in M2D defining the anti-de Sitter dimension. Anti-de Sitter space, this being the conformal boundary, and that representing time. As you can see in this picture, it becomes as big as it can in the center, in the centrifuge, and or centripetal, and then the centrifuge, as it gets to the end, or the surface horizon, it gets smaller and smaller and becomes fractalized, and so it's the opposite of our universe, as our universe became extremely crunched and fractalized as a singularity, and then became more increasingly complex. This is a singularity in the center, and it becomes ever more complex as you reach its surface horizon. So it's basically the opposite of our own universe. There are 4 forces of the universe that play important roles, that rule everything that happens in the universe. The 4 forces of the universe are called gravity, the weak force, electromagnetism, and the strong force. Conservation laws of matter and energy is constant. Energy cannot be destroyed or created, and instead goes through an extreme cycle of black holes and white holes. The mythology of the creation of the universe and its destruction is when in many cultures, in Greek, it's donated as Alpha and Omega, and Chronos, meaning the god of time. Science has taken its own perspective on how reality was truly formed, and it is fantastic in itself, and is similar to creation mythos in the past, but is based on modern theory on the principles of causality and time and space having equal and opposite reactions in an endless void of nothingness to allow an infinite radiant electromagnetic energy known as the Big Bang to occur within quantum fluctuations. These different levels of energy is known as the principal quantum number, denoting energy levels and eigenstates, being denoted by the variable n. So when n equals 0 and when energy equals 0, that's being the 0-point vector equilibrium, when there's absolutely no particle movement and it's perfect void. It's theoretically connected when energy is equal to infinity and when dimensions are infinity. Now superposition. So to explain that, the theoretical mathematics behind infinity and 0, the Rydberg formula is used. When energy subscript, the principal quantum number equals negative Planck length, or Planck's constants, times Rydberg's constant divided by the principal quantum number squared. So when the n is large, when the energy levels is large, equals 0, the highest energy state being 0, when the electron is removed, when the energy state is n, is approaching infinity. So there's a theoretical connection between a 0-point equilibrium and when energy equals infinity. You have to have an infinite energy to get that particle to be completely still at a 0-point field. And Cantor's space-time is then translated into these hierarchical dimensions. The universe, according to quantum field theory, is made up of these different fields and particles with boson counterparts. The excitations of the fields being the boson particles, the Higgs field and the Higgs boson, the electromagnetic field and the photon boson, the strong and weak nuclear field and the gluon and W and Z bosons, dark energy field and the X17 boson. In some theoretical works, there's more fields and there are more bosons to experientially prove, up to 9 fields in bosons, such as inflatons and tachyons, including a possible boson for gravity, which proves elusive, called a graviton. Superpositions all these eigenstates values simultaneously, as quantum fluctuations between positive and negative energy levels are responsible. The four forces describe our current universe and how it operates separately, but in the past it could have existed as a unified field. This leads into two leading theories on quantum gravity to establish the unified field theory. The theory of everything in grand unified field theory can be supported through the coupling of gravity and the strong interaction. Through the use of the holographic approach, Naschie and Haramein, 2013, calculated the quantum gravity and the energy angular frequency and period for such a system in his methods. Page 270 to 273 in his paper. In his abstract, he writes a summary which states, we find an exact quantized expression of the Schwarzschild solution to Einstein field equations, utilizing spherical Planck units in a generalized holographic approach. We considered vacuum fluctuations with volumes as well as horizon surfaces, generating a discrete space-time quantization and a novel quantized approach to gravitation. When applied to the quantum scale, utilizing the charge radius of the proton within the code-data value, within the 2010 muonic proton charge radius measurement is utilized, we find a deviation from the proton rest mass. We identify the fundamental mass ratio between the vacuum oscillations on the surface horizon and the oscillations within the volume of a proton, and we find the solutions for the gravitational coupling constant to the strong interaction. We derive the energy, angular frequency, and period for such a system and determine its gravitational potential, closely correlated to the Yukawa potential, typically utilized to illustrate the exponential drop-off of the confining force. Zero free parameters or hidden variables are utilized. The significance of the ratio between vacuum oscillations is an important one in quantum physics. The one-dimensional harmonic oscillator problem describes this quantum fluctuations between 7 positive eigenstates moving in a forward time arrow towards positive infinity and 7 eigenstates moving in a backward time arrow towards negative infinity. Quantum numbers describe these eigenstate values within the principal quantum number describing energy levels in Bohr's atomic orbital theory. The azimuthal quantum number is the orbital quantum number giving angular momentum. The magnetic quantum number and the spin projection quantum number is useful for entanglement in the Pauli exclusion principle that each electron in an orbital must have different spins, so an s orbital will never have more than one electron in its orbital. The fluctuation of real and virtual particles is theorized to propagate for gravitational waves. Black holes and white holes in varying scales acting as a wormhole for quantum turbulence of gravity. The fluctuation of real and virtual particles is theorized to propagate gravitational waves. Black holes and white holes in varying scales acting as wormholes for quantum turbulence of gravity. In Haramein's introduction, he states in his paper, in 1916, Carl Schwarzschild published an exact solution to Einstein's field equation for the gravitational field outside spherical symmetric body. The Schwarzschild solution determines a critical radius for any given mass for when the escape velocity equals the speed of light. The region, which is typically denoted as the horizon or the event horizon, is given by a well-known definition, where the gravitational constant is the mass. John Archibald Wheeler in 1967 described this region of space as a black hole during a talk at the NASA Goddard Institute of Space Studies. In 1957, Wheeler has already had an implication of general relativity theorized in the presence of tunnels in space-time, or wormholes, and in 1955, as a consequence of quantum mechanics, the concept of space-time foam, or quantum foam, as a qualitative description of subatomic space-time turbulence. This theory predicts that the very fabric of space-time is a seething foam of wormholes and tiny virtual black holes at the Planck scale, as well as being the source for virtual particle production. In Wheeler's own words, the vision of quantum gravity is a vision of turbulence. Turbulent space, turbulent time, turbulent space-time, space-time in small enough regions should not be merely bumpy, not too erratic in its curvature, but it should fractionate into ever-changing, multiple connected geometries. The methods go on to calculating the holographic mass of black hole Cygnus and how it represents binatural systems and harmonic oscillators. Our universe is described as a varying scale of these black and white holes, and a singularity of gravity imploding in the center and exploding and radiating infinite electromagnetic radiation, being the centrifugal and centripetal forces. Centrifugal is an apparent force that acts outward on a body moving around the center, while centripetal is the force that acts on a body moving in a circular path and is directed towards the center around which the body is moving. In this animation, you can see this as the whirlpool goes towards the center, being the centripetal, being circular, directing toward the center, and centrifugal being on the outer of the double torus. And in electromagnetic fields, the north and south poles of the torus are double vortices. So let's see. Andreas Bajir provides a summary of Haramein's work in the following. It's commonly believed that information and energy disappears forever once caught within this curve. No known mechanism brings that information back out. However, the holographic model revises this understanding with a modified topology of spacetime, which allows information to both implode and expand from the singularity state. Rather than being a one-way ticket to nowhere, black holes are both radiating objects as well as imploding holes. This is made possible with just a little twist to Einstein's space-time manifold. In this model, the universal topology of spacetime, which equates black holes, is described as a rotating double torus. See the figure 2 in this animation, which is expanding and contracting on itself endlessly. Notice in this animation, as spacetime curls towards the centering singularity, it also curls like a whirlpool. Instead of an analogy like a trampoline, this curling motion generates a geometrization of spacetime, in which the natural rotation of spacetime manifold is the mechanical source of spin at all levels, from atoms to planets, stars, galaxies, and so on. Objects are forced to spin because spacetime itself curls. As it curves towards the singularity, this curling motion approaches the speed of light, generating enormous centrifugal forces, which in turn creates expansion. The expanding space is finally overcome by the curvature of space and contracts back towards the center, only to repeat this process again. This continuous cycles of implosion and expansion produces the forces of nature known as gravitation and electromagnetism. The gravitational field is generated as spacetime curves towards the center of the system. And the electromagnetic radiation is produced when centrifugal forces near the center forces it to expand or to radiate. Electromagnetic radiation is thus mechanically connected to spacetime curvature, gravity, and spin. Here, we actually learn the universal topology of the rotating double torus actually generates the various structures we see in the cosmos, from atoms to planets, stars, galaxies, quasars, and so on. The expanding portion of a black hole takes the shape of a sphere and is called a white hole. Describing its repulsive and radiating nature, the black hole then is actually a co-concentric black hole / white hole, also dubbed black hole. It's spelled with W-H-O-L-E, where the imploding black hole is inside this simultaneously expanding white hole. These radiating white holes and the energy dynamics that occur around them are what we perceive as the atoms, stars, planets, and such. At the center of the topology is a literal hole, and the point in where extreme curvature collapses towards an infinite density or singularity. Now, at this point, all forces in the space-time manifold meet in perfect symmetrical balance, creating a thermal equilibrium, and is the appearance of the vacuum absolute stillness, centering the system with the relative center of rotation, much like the eye in the center of a hurricane. The arrow of time and causality is questioned in the findings of interdisciplinary physics. According to an article from Interdisciplinary Physics, in a section of the journal Frontiers in Physics, Christian Lopez says, symmetries play an important role in the fundamental physics as they are typically taken as guides to look into the physical theory's structure. Now roughly, a symmetry is a transformation, a map, that leaves invariant the structure of the theory and somehow encodes in its laws. For instance, the physical law L turns out to be invariant under the operation of the translating the system from one point of space to another, then it is told that the space-time structure is assumed by theory is isotropic. Thereby, such invariance teaches us something about space's properties. This reasoning has drawn philosophers' attention as a way to approach long-standing philosophical problems from a new perspective. The nature of space and time may be addressed by digging into physical theory's symmetries. Philosophically and scientific literature has devoted special efforts to use this rationale to stem metaphysical conclusions about the nature of time, particularly whether or not time has a privileged arrow or direction. There are some properties that intuitively attaches to time, like a flow-like behavior, partial ordered, or privileged direction, and so on. However, such properties might not have a physical correlate in the natural world. Physical theories, as long as they are meant to express the world, are supposed to also tell us whether time actually instantiates these properties. Yet there are two kinds of questions one might raise at this stage. On one hand, one could want to know why would our world, a particularly evolution of fundamental dynamical laws, look temporarily asymmetric, and on the other hand, one could be interested in whether our fundamental physical theories imply a fundamental direction of time, time moving forward, time moving backward. The philosophical questions on how events unfold through cause and effect and motions can be helped answering through physical understanding of the symmetries of space and time. A direction in time moving forward towards positive infinity and a direction of time in which events occur backwards towards negative infinity is a question both in science, philosophy, and religion. This is because a debate on cause and effect, whether there is an infinite causal chain or a grand beginning and an end. Anti-de Sitter space and de Sitter space algebraically and graphically produces these results of two time arrows, one moving forwards and one moving backwards towards positive and negative infinity. Euler's identity as Euler's number raised to imaginary number times pi plus 1 equals 0 denotes the vacuum energy or zero-point field vector equilibrium being a logarithmic-based Euler's number raised to that imaginary number multiplied by pi plus 1 equals 0, a trigonometric connection to these exponential complex equations. Now this is mentioned with Basini's and Capozziello's theory on spacetime structure of open quantum relativity. In the framework of open quantum relativity, we discuss the geodesic and chronological structures relating to the embedding procedures and the dimensional reduction from the fifth dimension to fourth dimension spacetime, the emergence of an extra force turn, the deduction of masses of particles, and two time arrows, and a closed time-like solutions are all considered leading to the straightforward generalization of causality principle. This dynamical structure is further rich since two time arrows and closed time-like paths naturally emerge. This fact then leads to a reinterpretation of the standard notion of causality, which can be in this way always recovered even in the case in which it is questioned, like an entanglement phenomena and quantum teleportation phenomena, because it is generalized to a forward and backward causation. And in this case, the 5D Klein-Gordon equation and the 5D field equations all have wave-like solutions. And this solution has the necessity of the existence of two time arrows naturally emerging as a direct consequence due to the structure of the functions of omega of time, closed time-like paths, circular paths. The existence of closed time-like paths mean that anti-de Sitter and Gödel solutions also have allowed possibilities in the dynamics. The quantum foam holographic mass in the relation to quantum gravity is essential for the candidate of theory of everything. The universe starts simply, and it becomes more complex throughout time. Its hyperdimensional octahedron geometry of the vacuum and its vector equilibrium has been called many names, like zero-point energy by Einstein. An understanding of the void of nothing and how it balances with the infinite expansive quintessence energy of everything as the ultimate universal black and white hole. The theoretical physics seeks to understand the cosmology and energy conditions shortly after the Big Bang, which put everything into motion, the event in which time and space begun. This instance is described by theoretical physicist Michio Kaku as he said, "In the beginning, God said, let the four-dimensional divergence of an antisymmetric second-rank tensor equal 0, and there was light."